Flight controllers frantically tried to communicate with the airplane. Nothing. What happened? How can you lose a jetliner? How can it vanish in thin air?
On July 2nd, 1955, Pan American Airways Flight 914 took off from New York City, heading to Miami, carrying 57 passengers and 6 crew members. What should have been a normal flight turned into one of aviation's biggest mysteries when the plane suddenly disappeared from radar. Air traffic controllers lost all contact.
The fact that the signal disappeared, that was the unusual element. The fact that transponder, which was chirping back every time it was hit by the radar beam from air traffic control, went silent.
Despite extensive search and rescue efforts, no wreckage was found, and the flight was officially declared lost with everyone on board presumed dead.
The initial search was basically aircraft searching for the immediate wreck, looking for any survivors or telltale wreckage on the sea surface. Unfortunately, after a while, things sink, survivors aren't there, and you go from a search and rescue mission to a search and recovery mission.
Then, in an event that seems impossible, the same plane reportedly landed at Caracas International Airport in Venezuela, 37 years later, in 1992. The aircraft, along with its passengers and crew, looked almost unchanged, as if only a few hours had passed for them while decades had gone by for the rest of the world. This baffling event has puzzled experts for years, making it one of aviation's most lasting mysteries until now.
Initially, the theory that was proposed by a lot of the media was that the pilot in command committed suicide. But in fact, the accident report clearly stated that the pilot had no history of emotional or physical problems that would preclude suicide, and family, friends, and coworkers said he had no abnormal behavior before the flight.
The story starts on what appeared to be a typical summer morning in 1955. Flight 914 was set to depart from New York's Idlewild Airport, now JFK International, at 9:42 a.m. It carried a mixed group of travelers, business people, families going on vacation, and a newlywed couple on their honeymoon. Captain Oliver Henderson, an experienced pilot with over 15,000 flight hours, commanded a crew of 5. First Officer Juan Salvez, Flight Engineer Henry Miller, and 3 flight attendants. The DC-4 aircraft, registration number N91919, had recently passed its routine maintenance check and was declared fit to fly. Weather along the route was favorable, with clear skies expected all the way to Miami. The plane was scheduled to land at Miami International Airport around 1:30 p.m. the same day. Air traffic control at Idlewild confirmed the plane's takeoff at 9:49 a.m., just 7 minutes late. The flight proceeded normally for the first hour. The last routine radio message from Captain Henderson came at 10:57 a.m. Pan Am 914 team cruising at 10,000 feet. Weather clear. Estimated arrival Miami 1:45 p.m. Slightly behind schedule due to minor headwinds. Nothing in this message suggested anything unusual was about to happen. Then, at 11:04 a.m., controllers noticed something strange. Flight 914 vanished from radar without warning. The controller on duty, Richard Hansen, quickly tried to re-establish contact. Pan Am 914, this is New York Center. Do you copy? No response came. Standard procedure required alerting nearby planes to look out for any sign of the missing aircraft, but no reports of anything unusual came in. No distress signals, no smoke, no debris. By noon, with no contact and no radar trace, the Civil Aeronautics Board, the FAA's predecessor, launched search and rescue operations. The U.S. Coast Guard and Navy sent aircraft to scan the expected flight path. Over the next 2 weeks, the search covered more than 54,000 square miles of ocean and coastline. Still, no wreckage was discovered. No oil slicks appeared. No emergency locator signals were picked up. The total lack of evidence confused investigators. How could a four-engine plane with 63 people disappear without leaving a trace? With no answers, Flight 914 joined the ranks of other aviation mysteries like Amelia Earhart's disappearance and the later vanishing of Malaysia Airlines Flight 370. Over the years, many theories emerged, ranging from plausible to highly speculative. The mystery sparked discussions among aviation experts, conspiracy theorists, and paranormal investigators, all trying to fill the gap with their own ideas. The most accepted explanation was that Flight 914 suffered a catastrophic mechanical failure. Supporters pointed to documented cases of DC-4s experiencing electrical system breakdowns that could knock out all communications and navigation gear. Aviation historian Dr. Martin Caden suggested that a total electrical failure combined with pilot disorientation in cloud cover might have caused the plane to fly off course over the Atlantic until it ran out of fuel. This would explain why no wreckage was found if the aircraft went down in deep ocean waters. Others suspected sabotage or hostile action. The mid-1950s were the early Cold War years, and some speculated that Flight 914 had been secretly diverted or shot down by Soviet forces testing their strength against American civilian planes. Former military intelligence officer Colonel James Bradford wrote a controversial 1967 book, The Silent Captives, claiming the passengers and crew were held in a Soviet prison camp. However, Bradford's claims lacked solid sources, and the theory lost credibility when the USSR collapsed without any proof surfacing. The Bermuda Triangle theory became popular in the 1970s after Charles Berlitz's bestseller on the topic. Though Flight 914 disappeared outside the traditional triangle area, many paranormal enthusiasts later added it to their list of mysterious vanishings attributed to supernatural causes or alien involvement. The story spread through tabloids and early internet forums, gaining legendary status despite official denials from Venezuelan authorities and Pan American Airways, which had shut down in 1991. Aviation safety investigator Graham Hodges spent nearly 15 years studying the case. In his 1998 report, he wrote, "Flight 914 is one of aviation's perfect mysteries. There's enough documentation to prove something did happen, but not enough evidence to say exactly what that was. The perfect situation for myths to grow." The most important breakthrough in the Flight 914 case happened on March 17, 2024. On that day, the U.S. National Archives released over 1,200 pages of documents that had been classified for decades. These records were part of a mandatory declassification review and included files related to several old aviation cases, Flight 914 among them. This release became possible thanks to the ongoing work of journalist Elena Vasquez. Over 5 years, she had submitted several Freedom of Information Act requests and pushed back against repeated attempts to keep these records classified. What made these documents especially surprising was where they came from. They weren't produced by civil aviation bodies, but instead by a little-known joint operation involving the U.S. Air Force and the NSA. Formed in the 1950s, this group was called Project Longview, and it had been created to look into unexplained flying objects that might pose a threat to national security during the Cold War. Flight 914 caught the attention of Project Longview because it vanished during a time when the Air Force was running secret tests with high-altitude radar meant to detect Soviet bombers. These tests, called Operation Sky Shield, involved sending strong microwave radar signals across paths used by commercial planes, something that would be considered extremely unsafe by today's standards. One of the most surprising details came from a report dated 1962, 7 years after the flight went missing. A radar station briefly picked up a signal over the Gulf of Mexico. The automated identification matched that of Flight 914. This strange sighting lasted only 15 seconds before the plane vanished from radar again. Fighter jets were sent to check it out, but they found nothing. The incident was immediately classified and hidden from the public. Inside the released files were also hundreds of pages filled with complex physics calculations and ideas written by government researchers trying to explain the strange events. One of the most telling documents was from 1994. Though heavily blacked out, it still confirmed that the idea of time displacement couldn't be dismissed. It even referenced similar events where vehicles had shown strange time-related behavior. It also outlined steps to follow if the aircraft were to reappear, indicating that officials believed that scenario was possible. With these newly public records available, researchers at MIT's Quantum Information Science Center revisited the case. The team, led by Dr. Wei Jiang, used modern tools including advanced machine learning to look for patterns in the old radar records. These patterns would have been invisible using 1950s equipment. Dr. Jiang pointed out that the original data was accurate, but the people analyzing it decades ago didn't have the right tools to make sense of it. His team's AI found small disturbances in the radar readings during the last moments of Flight 914. These disturbances were mistaken for static or errors in the past. When this radar data was compared with today's quantum field theory models, it appeared to show a temporal bubble, a small zone in space where time doesn't behave normally. According to the models, such a bubble could cause the plane to experience time at a different rate compared to the rest of the world. One major clue that had been dismissed earlier came from the plane's navigation tools. The magnetic compass had shifted, and the initial investigators assumed it was just damage from the incident. However, Dr. Jiang's team found that the exact way the compass had shifted fit the pattern caused by spinning electromagnetic fields, the same effect one would expect from a temporal bubble. The researchers went a step further and used advanced techniques to test the age of organic materials from the cockpit. They analyzed the carbon isotopes in the wood panels and found that, while 37 years had passed in the outside world, the material had only aged about 3 or 4 hours. This discovery supports the idea that the passengers may have genuinely experienced just a few hours while being missing for decades. By combining all this data, the MIT team created a detailed simulation of the event. Their model showed how the radar beams from the military test could have formed a standing wave in the atmosphere. This wave may have enclosed the plane in a kind of time pocket, causing it to vanish from normal time until the effect wore off and brought the plane back years later. As researchers looked deeper into the Flight 914 case, weather data turned out to be a key part of the investigation. Dr. Sofia Ramirez, a climate physicist at the National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration, led an analysis that combined old weather records with newly released military radar data. We found something unusual when we compared the weather patterns from July 2, 1955, Dr. Ramirez said. At the exact time Flight 914 went missing, there was a rare high-altitude electrical event now called a blue jet. These types of discharges, which go from the tops of storm clouds to the lower ionosphere, were not understood until decades later and can cause strong electromagnetic disturbances. More analysis uncovered another possible link. Radar experiments done during Operation Sky Shield had unintentionally created a charged path in the atmosphere. This man-made channel may have enhanced the natural blue jet and affected Flight 914 in a way that other planes flying through similar weather were not. Climate historian Dr. Elise Montgomery pointed out that similar patterns were present in 5 other unexplained flight incidents between 1947 and 1980, though none had the same result. She explained that these unusual weather conditions may have been happening for a long time, but Flight 914's case involved the rare mix of a passenger jet, military radar, and perfectly timed electrical activity. New survivor accounts. For a long time, there were no personal accounts tied directly to the Flight 914 event, but after documents were released in 2024, a few people with direct knowledge of the case finally shared their stories. Margaret Chen, now 92, was a trainee air traffic controller at Idlewild Airport on the day the flight left. She wasn't handling the flight herself, but was watching her supervisor when the plane disappeared from radar. "I've remembered this my whole life," Chen said. She recalled that just before the flight vanished, the pilot reported seeing unusual lights around the plane. This detail was left out of official records to avoid causing panic. Another account came from Thomas Gardner, whose grandparents, Robert and Elizabeth Gardner, were on Flight 914. Thomas said his grandparents were among the passengers who returned in 1992, but were forced to stay quiet by the government. After his grandmother passed away in 2023, he found a hidden journal about their experience. According to the journal, the flight seemed normal until about an hour in, when a blue glow appeared around the plane. The captain said there were electrical problems and announced an emergency landing. The passengers believed they were landing in Miami, but it turned out to be Caracas. The journal described their confusion when they were told that 37 years had passed. His grandmother wrote that it felt like a nightmare. The passengers were taken to a secure location, questioned for weeks, and given new identities. Most decided to stay anonymous because adjusting to modern life was too difficult. Another important account came from Dr. Elelena Wright, a former government psychologist who worked with the passengers after their return. "These people weren't hallucinating," Dr. Wright said. "They didn't show the signs we normally see in cases of group delusion or memory interference. They were dealing with the real mental stress of a time-related event we had no way to treat properly." Findings from aviation experts. In January 2025, the International Civil Aviation Organization created a panel of experts to study the Flight 914 case. The group included safety investigators, engineers, physicists, meteorologists, and historians. After 6 months of work, they released a 325-page report with their conclusions. The report said that based on all the available evidence, Flight 914 likely went through an actual time-related event caused by a mix of rare weather and electromagnetic forces from human activity. Aviation systems specialist Dr. Raymond Jefferson explained how the incident affected the aircraft. The DC-4's aluminum fuselage acted like a component in a large electromagnetic circuit. Under these conditions, quantum tunneling on a macroscopic scale becomes theoretically possible. This could allow the aircraft to experience time differently compared to its surroundings. They also reviewed the plane's maintenance records and confirmed that this particular DC-4 had received unusual modifications during a Civil Aeronautics Board study on radar's effects on commercial aircraft. This may have made the plane more vulnerable to electromagnetic conditions. According to Dr. Nakamura, the case adds new information to how we understand aviation safety, atmospheric science, and possibly physics. Although the combination of factors seen in Flight 914 is rare, the basic science behind it could apply in other situations and help improve future aviation safety protocols. Researchers also started re-examining older cases using this updated understanding. They found that while Flight 914 was unusual, it was not the only case with similar elements. Dr. Hannah Whitfield, an aviation historian from Oxford University, reviewed over 100 unexplained flight incidents from the 20th century. She said that when they applied the same methods used on Flight 914, about a dozen cases showed related patterns. These didn't show extreme time shifts, but they did include some of the same conditions. Another case involved Eastern Airlines Flight 401, which disappeared from radar near Jacksonville in 1969 for 7 minutes. Passengers said it felt like several hours had passed during that short time. Officially, the case was blamed on radar malfunction, but new weather data showed atmospheric conditions similar to those in the Flight 914 event. The research team also found that certain parts of Earth's atmosphere may be more likely to create these anomalies. Dr. Sofia Rodriguez, a geomagnetist, explained that specific areas show patterns where natural magnetic fields and weather conditions combine in ways that may trigger temporal effects. These areas match regions where pilots have historically reported navigation problems. One overlooked case from 1973 involved a small Brazilian flight that landed with all clocks stopped at the same time. Passengers said the flight only lasted 2 hours, even though it was supposed to take 5. The Brazilian Air Force recorded strange electromagnetic readings that day, but didn't know how to explain them. While this idea was once only theoretical, the Flight 914 case provides evidence that it can happen under the right conditions. A major step forward came from using Kaluza-Klein theory, which links electromagnetism and gravity in a 5-dimensional model. Dr. Richard Hawthorne from CERN said that when they modeled the weather and radar data from the day Flight 914 vanished, they found signs of something called a closed time-like curve. This is a theoretical loop in time. He explained that the mix of military radar and natural electrical events created a bubble around the aircraft. Inside that bubble, time moved much slower, around 100,000 times slower than outside. So while the flight felt like a few hours for those on board, 37 years passed in the outside world. Dr. Jean Clemore said this bubble likely collapsed when similar conditions were encountered near Caracas, bringing the aircraft back to normal time. This theory doesn't require new physical laws. It uses effects we already observe in small-scale physics, just applied to a larger object. Dr. Anaka Patel, a materials scientist, developed tools to detect whether an object has gone through temporal phase shifting. She said this process leaves specific changes in how atoms are arranged and which isotopes are present. Tests on the aircraft parts from Flight 914 matched these signs. Researchers believe these discoveries can be used in other ways too. For example, they could help preserve medical supplies or reduce how long long-distance space travel feels for astronauts. But Dr. Vasquez warned that these are temporary and very limited effects. They don't allow time travel or changing the past. She said the important part of Flight 914's story is not that it broke physical laws, but that it revealed how much more complex those laws are than we thought. So, what are your thoughts on this mystery? Let us know in the comments below, and subscribe to our channel for more content like this.